everybody, and welcome to the Westside Fairytales Horror and Lit Club for February 2020. How are you doing? I hope you're all good out there. I hope that Valentine's Day treated you well, or at least if that didn't happen, at least it didn't hurt too bad. Valentine's Day. This is my least favorite time of the year. Deep winter or late winter, depending on what you want to call it. Not quite early spring, for sure not the holidays anymore. all of the holidays in like January through like literally through June, right? I can't think of any, are all misery holidays. You know what I mean? Like they're either about something awful that happened, awful things happen on them, or they're just miserable. I mean, off the top of my head, I think of New Year's Day, which is the day that you have to just spend the whole day. Since I turned 19, I think, barring the few times where I could not drink because I was out of the country in the Marines, I have started every New Year off with a hangover, minus like 2 times. So for those of you who don't drink, maybe you start off the year fresh, but I literally start off every year at possibly one of the worst lows that you can be at, which is a post New Year's hangover. It's so you start bad, and then when you have nothing else for the rest of January, right? February, I do have one holiday that's for me, and that's my fiance's birthday, which is good. It's a little bit of a highlight. And then you have Valentine's Day, which is good for me, but not for everybody else, just like the other one. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I know more people that are miserable on Valentine's Day than happy. It doesn't even seem like if you are in a relationship that Valentine's Day is that great by default. You kind of have to do all the work to make Valentine's Day good. You know what I mean? It's not like Christmas or Halloween where everybody's kind of pitching in and doing their part, and it's like, oh man, dude, it's really nice being out here. I'm feeling like a real sense of community. It's like it's the day that turns everyone into a sea of unhappy, like, single people just like shouldering motherfuckers to the side. I remember it. I don't know if things have changed in the 5 years since I've been in a relationship, but I remember the bars on Valentine's Day, especially when I worked at them, as being especially gross. Gross and desperate and sad. And then there's the people that are actually couples who are like the few survivors, just like kind of looking down from the shaky bridge at a horde of zombies spread out beneath them. Maybe it's not that bad for everybody, but in general, I get the feeling that most people don't enjoy Valentine's Day unless they happen to have had a good one, and that's not necessarily going to be the case when you wake up. You know what I mean? Even people that have relationships are constantly broken up with on Valentine's Day. I feel like sometimes people do that just because they understand that, like, whoever they're breaking up with, they're like, fuck, well, there's no chance we're getting back together. But I guess the least I can do is give him, like, a good story to, like, maybe ease the transition into his next relationship, so that lady knows he's not going to be fawning over me. And then, when that guy gets, she broke up with me on Valentine's Day. It was miserable and I'm dying inside. Some lady will be like, oh, they're there. What do you have after that? Do you have like Martin Luther King Day, which always just, that's good, but I always just think of Martin Luther King getting assassinated. I cannot think of famous historical figures apart from their deaths because I'm me. Same with like JFK. I just think of them being like murdered. And then what do you have? March is another, Ides of March is the only one I can think of in March, and that's there's St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day is good. Sorry, I got yelled at from the other room. St. Patrick's Day is a bright spot in the heart of all that. Where you just get to see, if the Irish were just like a little shittier, like off as a culture, like that would be the most offensive holiday ever. It's cool because the Irish don't give a fuck. You know what I mean? But like, if people went, and Cinco de Mayo is good too. People do stuff on St. Patrick's Day that they also try to do on Cinco de Mayo, like culture wise, and the people that do it on Cinco de Mayo get lit up on Twitter, dude. As it on fire, showing up at the bar at like a Mexican restaurant wearing a fucking sombrero and a Pancho Villa mustache. Like, no. It's not good. It's a bad look. But that's still that's just a drinking holiday. You know what I mean? It's not a real holiday. You can't call that off. You can't call Cinco de Mayo off. Usually you don't want to call those days off anyway. You want to call the day after that day off. And then what do we got continuing on? We got April. At best, that's Jesus gets murdered day. Easter. And if you're a pagan, lucky you, then you get to just celebrate the spring solstice. Is that the solstice? Or is that the equinox? I think that's the spring equinox. I'm sorry. I feel like I should know that because, all those pagan and pseudo-pagan ritual days and stuff are so important in the horror world, but I can't ever keep that shit straight because it means literally nothing to me. But if it's something that you're going to celebrate, I think I would much rather celebrate those feast days, those pagan feast days, than the Catholic redos. Hang a dude on a cross, and then here's some Easter eggs. And then continuing through April, you have the good old 420. Which is pot smoking holiday, and also Hitler's birthday, which I found out because I watched Norm Macdonald talk for 5 minutes, and then that made me sad. So now every time someone says 420, I'm also like, I'm surprised somebody hasn't gotten online and trying to ruin that yet. I am surprised. No, people grasp at straws at anything just so they can get them sweet reclicks, sharing like one of those hollow ass woke opinions and shit. I am surprised that somebody trying to like, you know the type. If you're out there on the internet, it's usually like some late 20s, early 30s person. Could be a dude, could be a chick. And they're going to be like, my great grandparents knew a guy in the Holocaust after he came home, and having this pot smoking day on the day of the birth of Earth's most heinous villain is disrespectful. How dare you smoke as he has murdered Jewish people by fire and smoke as well. Something like that. You know what? Someone just take that and run with it. Just go ahead. Someone just shut down 420 and ruin it for us, for all of us. I don't even do it anymore. Even when I more habitually smoked weed, I did not celebrate. It always sounds weird to me. I don't understand the appeal of celebrating 420, and I don't think anyone really does, except for people that are like that are known in the public space. And you know what I mean? And I feel like even they feel like they're obligated, but no one's just like, man, it's 420, it's time to get high, unless you're like a teenager or just like kind of out of touch 50-year-old that's trying to look cool to his kids. That seems like the demographic for 420. And then I think we finally get to June and you get like Memorial Day, which is like finally a day off. You know what I mean? Is that Memorial Day? Yeah. No. That's the work day. I can't remember. I feel like I should remember Memorial Day because it is in it's in the thing. Because Memorial Day was Armistice Day, right? Which means it should be in like August. So I'm thinking of Labor Day? No, because you can't wear white after Labor Day. I don't know. I can't remember these days. Even when I worked in, like, because I don't get off. I haven't gotten off for holidays in basically my entire life. Not since high school, man. I graduated high school when I was 17, and I went right to the Marine Corps, and in the Marines, you do not get those federal holidays off unless you do. And usually when you're in the infantry like I was, you don't. Like you'll just get paid for it, like a double pay or some shit like that. Sometimes you get like the Memorial Day, Labor Day 48s, which is like a 4-day weekend. But because I was there in the middle of the Iraq War and we were doing constant deployments, I got deployed 3 times in 4 years. So like we just never had any fucking downtime. So you were always on troop training and shit. And they're like, yeah, this is canceled, that's canceled, this is canceled, that's canceled. But then you would come home and you'd get like a month off. So there's that too. Which, by the way, a month off is not that great when you don't have any money and no time to plan for your vacation. You usually just go sit at home and you sit in your parents' living room and you watch TV until way too late in the morning. And you just think about how much fun your friends are probably having because they're more socially adept at 21 than you are. And then I was in school, and I did not take off really when I was in school either because I was broke and I had nothing to fall back on other than the GI Bill and myself. So I worked every holiday. I worked in bars too. And when you work in bars, you have to work holidays. Like restaurant people, I'm there with you. Restaurant people do not get off on holidays. It's actually usually when you have to work, except for like maybe Christmas and maybe Thanksgiving. But, even those are like 50-50. And then after that, I worked in the news industry. In the news industry, you don't ever get holidays off because you have to cover the news, especially like on holidays. Like I was a crime and courts reporter. You have to work on Halloween and you have to work on fucking Christmas because that's when everyone gets murdered and kills themselves and drives off the road and a big fiery drunken alcoholic crash, and you got to go there and just hold that glass on them bodies. I'm sorry though, but yeah, we're in the doldrums of the holidays, and I hate it. That aside though, welcome to the Westside Fairytales Horror and Lit Club. If you're new here, by the way, this is a non-canon, it's a quick, simple, long, confusing discussion of the month's picks that I made during the regular season episode, which in the case of this month is the 2007 movie Wreck. That's REC. And The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros, circa from 1983. And I'll be getting to those in a minute. Neither of those two things made a gigantic, like a crushing discussion level impact on me. They're pretty good, both of them are, but I'm going to talk about some other stuff first because it's much more like thickly in my mind right now. And what I want to talk about is Bates Motel, because I have been burning through this series at a lightning fast rate with my fiance. I think Bates was on AMC or maybe FX, one of the two middle level. I consider them. What do you call? Jesus Christ! Cable networks, cable TV networks. So it's like adult cable TV, but it's still cable TV. So it's not like premium cable TV like HBO, where you can see some like boobs and some butt and maybe like a dick. And extraordinary gore. So it has to kind of straddle that. And so those sort of series, I'm always like, they can be good and they can be really, really bad. Like for all of your, the one where he makes meth, Breaking Bad. For every Breaking Bad you do have something like 12 unwatchable seasons of fucking Walking Dead. Don't at me. That show is that I hate that show because it disappointed me so much. I loved the first and second season of it. The third season bored me, and then it completely fell off from there. Respect to Negan, respect to all the other things. I actually read further into the comics, which also sort of just stopped interesting me than I saw of the show. But I remember I went back to watch it one time. And people were taking cover from assault rifle fire behind a fucking filing cabinet that was empty. It didn't even have the drawers in it. And I was like, I'm good. Clearly no one on this show gives a fuck. I don't know why I'm expected to too. So they've just been churning that dreck out for forever. But you have other types of series in that category. Nip Tuck is really, really good. If you've ever seen Nip Tuck, Monk is kind of older in that realm, but it was like, hey, we're gonna make a mature, like thinky type story, or like quirky, interesting characters and stuff. Stuff that really draws you in, but it is still like a line. You can't do very experimental type things. You can never do True Detective in any real sense on AMC. Fuck, The Terror is from AMC. That's my favorite single season of television ever. I mean, and like it's mind-boggling that The Terror and The Walking Dead might have been on like right after each other. That's crazy. But these mid-level cable TV, adult cable TV shows can get really, really good, and they can get really, really bad, and they can kind of like flow in and out of it, so you never really know what to expect. And I remember hearing that they were going to adapt The Bates Motel, and I was like, Bates, like fucking Norman Bates, like Psycho? Back in, it was 2000 and I can't remember. I think it's 2011 maybe that series aired, early 2010s. And I was hearing about it and just like, this is never going to be, it's impossible. Like that's such a crazy concept to adapt. I mean, cause I'd seen the movie. The movie's great. If you've never seen Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, please, this is a horror and lit club. Please go see that movie. It's fucking great. It holds up, weirdly enough. Don't expect a slasher film, please. If you're one of the slasher types of horror fans where you got to watch 16 teenagers die in like cartoonishly over the top ways, you're not going to get as much out of Psycho as you think. It's a classic of modern horror, but it's much more of an inspiration to like things like Silence of the Lambs and, The Witch, and a little bit more, not like smarter, but less easy to get into. It's an incredibly simple story. I don't even really feel like I'm not even going to entertain the possibility that I'm going to be spoiling somebody on a movie that is literally older than I think my dad is. So Norman Bates is the manager of a hotel, right? And he's a grown man. He's an adult. He's probably in his early to mid 30s, if I had to guess. And the story, the original conceit of the story is that it's about a woman who robs her boss and then runs off with a bunch of money. She doesn't really rob her boss. She robs one of her boss's clients, which is kind of in turn robbing her boss, but not necessarily as bad as you think. She does it kind of on the spur of the moment, and runs and ends up staying at the Bates Motel. And while she stays at the Bates Motel, she talks to this very charming, well-spoken, shy young man named Norman. And he seems a little odd, but odd in a nice way. And of course, he ends up murdering her and and burying her in the swamp behind the house. But he doesn't necessarily murder her. You think it's his mother. And that's the great twist of Psycho, is that Norman Bates is blaming all of his kills on his mother, but he's actually got a split personality. And when his mother, quote unquote, who's actually a dead woman, takes over, he puts on a wig and a dress and goes and stabs people to death. And that's Psycho. That's basically the overarching premise of the story. And there's actually a bunch of sequels, which I'm planning on watching very soon with my fiance, because I want to see more of it. I've heard from people that have reviewed them online that the sequels to the original Psycho are actually very good. They almost all have the same guy in them. I think I can't remember the name of the actor that plays Norman, but he's in all of them. And apparently they're if not like great, they're much better than expected. But you should absolutely go see Psycho. If you hate it, you hate it. But I will say this: it's much more entertaining than The Exorcist. If you're that kind of person that's nervous about going back to old horror classics because you think they're going to be boring. Anyone that goes back and watches Rosemary's Baby and tells me it's boring, you're fucking fired. Uninstall this podcast. complete aside, but Bates Motel, I never thought it was going to work. I'd seen that movie. I liked it. It was a very good movie. Very interesting. Really, really well shot. It's one of those things. I mean, it's Hitchcock. If you don't know much about Hitchcock, he's like one of the original like masters of shadow work and camera angles and stuff. It's really incredible. Not everything dates well. His classic The Birds is like one of the original like creature films. It's not like a creature film, but like an animals attack film. I think there's an actual name for that subgenre of horror, but it doesn't immediately strike me. But other titles in it are literally anything with an animal's name in it. So like tarantulas is one, spiders, bees. Have you ever seen Bees, man? That is a movie. I don't know where I saw it, but I do know I saw it on basic television back when I was like 8 years old. And even then it could not scare me because the bees looked really, really calm because they took actual shots of bees. But it's basically like Africanized killer bees. You know, people have been talking about killer bees going to murder everybody for like 40 fucking years now. Apparently it's actually been for like 60. And they were making old black and white movies about it, but, you know, they still haven't gotten us. I'm starting to be under the suspicions that maybe the news media isn't being all that honest about the things that they're nervous about. It's crazy to me, but it's a possibility. But Bates Motel, man. So Bates Motel, the story, which I made it up to 4 seasons of, we literally just finished the 4th season of this the night before I started recording this episode, and it's really just great. It's not perfect. It's not like you have to see it. It changes everything about the way that you'll view television, but it's so competent and so endearing that like it has literally swept me off my feet on accident like 4 seasons in a row. The main person is a kid named Eddie Hightower, I think his name, or Freddie Hightower, some Eddie, it's High something, whatever, and he's this scrawny, whippy, waifish, tallish sort of kid man. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Any scene, start to finish, you'll either get the feeling that he's actually 24 or that you're maybe looking at a 14-year-old. And it's really quite an intentional thing. And he talks perfectly. Like, I feel like he just watched Psycho over and over and over again for like half a year. And obviously the writers have to take an extraordinary amount of credit for just writing the hell out of it. But he talks like this, and Mother, I don't understand what you're even going on about. this sort of, and then his mother, Norma Bates, is alive, very much alive for most of the season or series. And she is played by, I cannot remember the woman's name, but she is she plays Elaine Warren in the Conjuring movie universe. I don't even know how to say that. The woman psychic from The Conjuring, her and the other guy that's the guy that's in every single one of those movies, the Warrens. She plays Norma Bates, and she might be the fucking worst woman I have ever seen on film, and it's perfect start to finish. I literally cannot get enough of her until I do get enough of her, and I'm like, I gotta look at my phone for a second until this scene's over. She is a character study in manipulative, shitty women. Like, oh my God, she's got it all down. Like, she is quite literally the worst mother in the world, because not just because like she's like a generic worst mother, where it's like, oh, she beats her kids and she cuts them and stabs them. No, not that. She just does such pure, laser-focused psychological damage that you can literally watch scenes where Norman is never going to be the same again. You can like watch her pull his fucking soul apart thread by thread every other episode. It's the point where she'll say something to him and he'll be like, just stunned. What? And she'll try to walk away, and then people try to walk away, and she always bursts into tears. Oh no, please don't be mad at me. I couldn't take it. I can't take it. And then when that one doesn't work, they'll be like, Norma, I can't deal with you crying. And she's like, well, fine then. Dude, she's just popping all over. And she's a damaged person too. You got to give her props. It's not like she arrived at this state of being trying to be a piece of shit, but she fucking got there, and it's just so good to watch. Those two people, Norma and Norman, form the heart of the show, quite literally and figuratively. And then around them is actually assembled an extraordinarily competent cast of characters. There's the local sheriff, Tom Romero is his name. Norman's brother Dylan, who's a recurring character through every season that I've seen. One of his friends from school, Emma, who's a recurring character, and then an assortment of characters who I won't name because a lot of them die. The body count's not hilariously high. I would say the body count per season is on par with something. No, not even like Breaking Bad. It's fairly small. You know what I'm saying? But there is a body count. I think the weaknesses of the show are that it telegraphs. It telegraphs a lot. But I think that just is one of those things that comes with having one of those types of, middling level cable audiences where you're like, hey, we've got this great show and we're going to put in a lot of cool conceptual shit. But there are going to be some just like, some tired-eyed people that are trying to get some shut off your brain TV in, and they're not going to want to think about this stuff. So let's nip that out and then continue on in a different direction, which I really appreciate. I don't mind it at all because it makes me feel smart because I'm like, oh yeah, I too write the horrors. The horrors. I can't say that word right. If anyone doesn't know that, I cannot pronounce the word horror right. Horror. That's how you're supposed to say it, but I say whore like a prostitute, but that doesn't sound like prostitute whore in my mind. I guess it's from where I'm from, but my fiance points it out to me all the time. But anyway, that's the Bates Motel, and I'm 4 seasons into it right now, and we're gonna start the 5th season tonight after I finish recording this and eat dinner. And I'm so excited. I haven't been this into a long form TV show in a while. I think since Game of Thrones. It's not like Game of Thrones early season good, but I feel like it's not gonna let me Game of Thrones late seasons just let me the fuck down and kick me in the nuts over my expectations of where the show can go. If its job of telegraphing itself is we're just to the point in the show where it's very much transitioning into the Psycho movies, and I'm fucking for it. It's a fucking roller coaster. It's good the whole time, and you should absolutely check it out if you get a chance. It's on Netflix. That's how we're watching it. So hop on the Netflix. Put Bates Motel in your list and try to get to it before they fucking snatch it out from underneath you. I think that's the other reason we're watching it so fast. We watched some other shows a little too casually, and fucking Netflix ripped them out from underneath me, and I'm not happy about it, but, what can you do? So, on to my discussion of the HLC titles for this month. The first, I'm going to start with Mango Street. The House on Mango Street is obviously by Sandra Cisneros. She published it in 1983. Since then, it's gone on to sell more than 6 million copies. It's a New York Times bestseller. It won a plethora of awards, most of the basic writing awards that you can imagine. It either placed, nominated. It's very much a celebrated novel, and you should let it exist on your radar. You don't have to rush out and read it. Although if you do want to, you're going to be able to finish it in the laziest of lazy afternoons. I think the entire novel took me 2.5 hours to read, and I read it during loading times while playing video games. It's a video game with an extraordinarily long, like 5 to 10 minute loading time, but still. And it's good. I really liked it. I was present in the novel. I can read while doing other stuff. I can't not read once I start reading stuff. So it's actually why I'm stalling on starting a Paul Joseph Tremblay novel. My first, Head Full of Ghosts. But The House on Mango Street concerns the life and times, the young life and times, of a girl named Esperanza, as she sort of explores existence in the microcosm of Chicago in the 60s-ish, 60s, 70s kind of era, which I'm not familiar with city-wise. I'm not familiar with era-wise at all. She would have been very much almost to an adult by the time my dad was born. My dad was born in 1964, so she's kind of, maybe just a few years older than him. Actually, I do know that. She was born in Chicago in 1954, so she's literally 10 years older than my dad. And yeah, it's a world that I have no familiarity with. I don't know anything about, and this is what they call it Chicano. That's not Chicana, which is formerly a flat pejorative term, but it was reclaimed, but you don't really use it anymore. And that was a term specifically for Mexican Americans, not necessarily other nationalities that were moving to America from other Spanish-speaking countries, although they would get lumped in with them because of just standard run-a-day arrogance, ignorance, and racism. But it was reclaimed only for sort of this period, which is something I was learning about when I was researching this. And it wasn't like a flat pejorative. It was just more like, if you say it with a bad voice, then it's an insult. Otherwise, it's not funny. But it's not like an absolute racial slur. It's kind of, as those people progressed, being in, and they'd have Chicano communities in places like Chicago and, wherever the hell else. And the thing was, they were Mexican Americans that had kind of turned their back sort of on Mexican culture, or not necessarily turn their back, but were just really trying hard to assimilate into American culture while kind of leaving stuff like that behind. So a lot of, making sure that your kids know English, not really focusing that hard on making sure that they know Spanish, to speak Spanish and stuff. And that kind of came and went in a wave. And then the more common Hispanic took over, as a description, which I found out was not necessarily nice. Although that was like the term I was taught growing up, is that, any Spanish, South American, Spanish speaking, what we would call Latina communities nowadays, the proper way to refer to people of that ethnicity was Hispanic, to be nice. And apparently that's not really a quite necessarily a thing anymore, but I don't think it's actually insulting. I've never heard anybody get torn up over it. But that sort of replaced the Chicana thing in the 80s, 90s as Mexican self-identification, and honestly, the greater understanding of South American cultures as being their own diverse things. If you're from Ecuador or Brazil or Paraguay, obviously from Brazil, you're not even speaking Spanish, but it's not like something somebody might notice. But you want to say like, hey, I'm a Brazilian American. Hey, I'm a Haitian American. That's Haitians don't know, whatever. Look, I'm talking too fast to actually keep up, but I'm Dominican American, things like that. And you're from the islands down there and coming up, you want to keep your own culture and not get lumped in together with everybody else. So you can kind of say, Latino, Latin, and that sort of gets it into the right area without it being, people thinking that you're from Mexico, because you're not from fucking Mexico. It's like going overseas and everyone's like, hey, are you Canadian? Are you Canadian? You're actually polite. Like, no, I'm an American. I just I just know my manners. Some of us do. And this is all a rough description, but at the time it was released in 1983, it was considered kind of a hallmark and like a seminal work of Chicana literature. Like, a Mexican American woman had written extensively about her experiences growing up. Well, she's actually just flat American, but she grew up in a Mexican American family, second generation immigrant, so trapped really in that world between coming from some place, but also not really having anywhere to go back to, but not really feeling that welcome in the place where you are, which is a real odd catch-22 of an existence, you know what I mean? Because, like, her parents could conceivably go back to Mexico. You know what I mean? It would be extremely difficult. Like, any move is hard. Any move back to somewhere that you don't want to be is even more difficult. And then add to that the fact that there's national borders and stuff in the way, and you're going to have to reestablish yourself there. It's a nightmare. But she doesn't even have that option. You know what I mean? Because she's an American. And she sort of discovered that about herself while she was attending an MFA workshop, I think that's what it's called, in Iowa after she got her degree. And she was like listening to all these other young writers talk about themselves, and they're predominantly white. I mean, if they're at an MFA program, I'm just going to go ahead and say that they're upper middle class. Because those things that's a lot of money to be spending on nothing most of the time. And she was like, I don't know these people. Like, these are supposed to be my peers, and maybe these people are going to be published and stuff, but I don't feel like, if this is what it's required to be published, I don't feel like I can do this because I'm a woman, which is already making it hard. I'm Latina. My parents aren't rich. I'm not a wealthy person, and my experiences are not these people's experiences, but they all talk to each other extremely casually about them as though that's just the nature of things. And so from there on, that sort of mentality is kind of what inspired her to really, like, maybe not necessarily write The House on Mango Street, as it's been explained. I'm very much boiling down a lot of important things to kind of get this going, but to collect stories that she'd already been writing and kind of focus them in on that feeling. And she succeeds very well. For such a small story, I mean, it could literally just be a multi-part piece in something like The New Yorker. It's really poignant and powerful. It kind of cuts away all the extra stuff. You know what I mean? If you were worried about, and I'll talk about myself in relationship to this soon enough, which is going to be hard on its own, but it's very much, if you cut away all of the less important traipsings of fiction, which they're kind of love it or hate it things, there's not really like a plot at all in it. It's a series of vignettes. It's what I would call actually like pseudo fiction, although it's technically fiction. It's probably a lot of stuff that's really, really true, or stuff that you almost remember that you want to put down, or like ideas that you had. And they all have this very, not dreamy feel, but almost daydreamy feel, where you're like, oh yeah, like you almost kind of remember it alongside her, which I really, really like, because it does a good job of not getting you bogged down in unnecessary details and kind of really getting you to the heart of what I consider to be arguments. It's got a real Greek theater feel in that way. If you don't know too much about Aristophanes and the clouds and the bees and the birds and all that horse shit, don't worry too much, but just kind of get that they are, if not necessarily morality plays, philosophy plays, and that's kind of how this plays out. Sorry to say, you read a story and you get the idea of the point she's trying to make. You know what I mean? It's not what maybe some people at the time would like from a writer like her either. And I see this all the time, and it drives me fucking crazy. Whether or not it's my place to be driven crazy by it, it just makes for bad fucking writing. Where these upper middle class or just fucking outright rich people that run publishing and shit and Hollywood productions and stuff, when they latch onto a story from a woman like Cisneros, they don't want it to be just a story. It has to be this like weird, overly convoluted and malicious poverty porn shit that is just like, she's got to hit like 6 notes. There's got to be that moment where people just sit, just like nodding sadly at the bleakness of life. You know what I mean? It almost it's in my mind. It's white saviorism without the presence of the white savior. I don't know. It's literally sometimes I read these things or I watch them and I'm like, this is, I think someone sucking down a fucking latte on the Upper East Side of Manhattan was reading this manuscript and going like, I just love it because I think about what I would do if I could just talk to her. You know what I mean? And you don't ever get that from this Cisneros thing. Like it talks extensively, about situations of where the main character Esperanza does not have her agency or she doesn't have power in that situation, but she never seems like she's without agency or without power in its entirety because she's always thinking about stuff. She's always seeing it. She's always witnessing it and understanding it. And you can really feel from the way that the stories, vignettes really, from how sharp they are and how laser focused they are on what they mean, that the woman, Sandra Cisneros, became after being, living her young life and with the ghost of this girl Esperanza in her childhood. She learned from these things, and anyone can. You know what I mean? One of my favorite ones is there's this quiet kid who's like, I think he's kind of like a bully, or if not a bully, just like, not a winner type kid. And he's looking at the sky. They all are, and they're talking about clouds, and she's like, that's a cumulonimbus cloud, and that's a nimbus cloud, and those are cirrus clouds, and whatever. And he's like, that one's God. And she's like, what? And they're like, what do you mean? He's like, that one's God. Like, that's just like, that's it. And that's kind of like a cool, profound moment, like it. You shouldn't even. I don't really want to like break it down for you why it's good, but it is. Just ride with me on this. But it's a very, very good and honest moment, and I love it. And the whole book is like that. Another one I like is just a short part of one series where a girl is talking about a woman who's got her hips, and they're young girls talking about each other and talking about women's bodies, post puberty, where they become wider hipped and busty and all that. And she says, you see the way that like she walks, and a way a woman's hips swings when they walk is so that they can put the baby to sleep. And she goes, that doesn't seem right. And then the more I thought about it, the more it did. And I was like, that's a great scene. Maybe there's a little bit something more poignant to it, but I just even love it as just the way that you kind of started figuring stuff out when you were a kid, where you were like, if it seems possible, why not let it be true? And I don't know. I don't know what to add on top of that. There's not too much to talk about with House of Mango Street unless you're really kind of having an almost argumentative conversation with somebody about it. Not argumentative, but interrogative. Not quite debate, but a real conversation. So on that note, if you guys would like to talk to me more about that story, please go to the Westside Fairytales Horror and Lit Club on Facebook. Check it out. And you can talk to everyone else there. I'm going to be starting up a thread for these recommendations probably the Monday after this episode comes out, so everyone has a little bit of time to listen to this, hopefully read the stuff, and then jump right in. And that's all going to be spoiler heavy, so, if you go there, have read the material if you don't want to be spoiled. There's not really spoilers in this book. There are no sudden twists or turns. Everything's kind of resolved within a page or two, so you shouldn't be too left out. But then again, to repeat myself, yeah, Absolutely go and check this out. Borrow it from a library. I read it on my Libby app, and it was great. Short, clipped, concise, and very interesting, very thought provoking. The next recommendation we have is our random horror recommendation for February of 2020, the movie Wreck from 2007 by Jaume Balaguero and Paco Plaza, who are a couple Spanish gentlemen from Spain. Rec, by the way, is R-E-C, as in record, not wreck. I feel like I've said that like 18 times, but people are listening to me, so sometimes like I do see a lot that when I say stuff, people sometimes completely misinterpret what I say because of the homonymical aspect of the word. So they're like, I thought that's what you said. Like, no, my bad. I just said something else. So then this is one of the cases where I want to clarify, because I'm pretty sure there is a movie called Wreck. No, Crash came out in like 2007. Or did it? Was that Crash? I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, so this movie concerns the investigation of a quarantined building, or soon-to-be quarantined building, by a young woman reporter, her camera crew, a couple firefighters, a few police, and some of the people that live in the building. And it's probably my favorite shaky cam movie of all time. It's definitely one of my top horror films of all time. Definitely not top 10, maybe top 50. But it is extremely good. It was, let's see, I don't have anything else. The main inspiration from, according to Balaguero and Plaza, for it was they wanted to make a horror movie that was a good horror movie, and have a TV feel to it. You know what I mean? More like a reality TV, which, and obviously, anybody that's been around for a minute, the big reality TV boom was mid 2000s, and it was kind of hitting its stride late 2000s, where it started to become, it started to expand past the boundaries of itself, and you started seeing shows like The Office, and ultimately Parks and Rec and stuff. Where you have handheld cameras and stuff. So people were starting to have internalized the kind of ebb and flow of that as a filmmaking technique into themselves, so that it wasn't too jarring. I think when Blair Witch is obviously the undisputed garbage queen of this genre. I fucking hate Blair Witch. I watched it when I was a kid, and I was like, this is some boring horse shit. And then I watched it when I was an adult, and I was like, this is some boring horse shit. When that movie came out, that shit scared people to fucking death. I don't know why. It's not scary. It's not even tense to me. It's just really shouty and boring. But I think a lot of why it was successful has to do with the fact that people hadn't really seen a movie with camera angles like that. Or not camera angles, but camera work like that almost ever. I was extremely young when that came out. I remember that it was mid-90s. I can't remember the exact year because I was probably like 8 or 10. So that would have been somewhere between like 95 and 97. But it was a phenom when it came out, and then no one else replicated it at all. People made movies making fun of it. People tried to kind of copy it. Obviously, today you have tons of found footage. They've created a genre. It's the found footage genre. I consider Rec not necessarily to be found footage, because I don't even think the footage is found. I think maybe it is, but found footage to me is the people that have found the footage and the finding of the footage is a plot element, as opposed to you would have to assume someone found it because you're watching it all. Maybe you're the one that found it. But, you know, in the case of like Wreck, even in the case of something like, what was that movie? It was J.J. Abrams' like first movie, fucking giant monster in New York. I can't remember, but that was a found footage movie of, some people hated it. I liked it, but I watched it when I was in the Marine Corps, so it doesn't actually count. Everything that I watched when I was in the Marines, man, getting any sort of entertainment media when you're in the situation like the Marine Corps, it's like getting water in the desert. Quite literally, you're so fucking thirsty, you do not care if you're drinking from a fucking salty ass goat trough or just, you know, like literally having water poured into your mouth by Aphrodite herself. There is no difference. You're just fucking thirsty. So there's all kinds of movies I watched back in that day, this one included, which did not age well, or I've seen again since, and I was like, oh my god, I'm embarrassed for how much I like that. It's very much not the case with Wreck, which I did rewatch and is still good. I've also seen the American remake, and I can't remember anything about it. Even though it's the exact same movie, it's an almost shot for shot remake. If it's not a shot for shot remake, it is definitely a beat for beat remake. What I mean by that is, shot for shot means it's literally the same movie with different characters, you know, and better film equipment. The American remake of Psycho, per our conversation earlier, or not the American, but the 2001, I think, remake of Psycho with Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates. Terrible, almost embarrassingly bad. Vince Vaughn just looks like a fucking murderer. The guy that plays Norman Bates in the original one does not seem like he could kill anyone, even to the end of the movie. Like literally up until the actual last shot of the movie, even when he's trying to murder people, he does not seem like he can kill anybody. As I've said a lot of times during the filming or during our watching of the Bates Motel, Norman Bates's weakness as a killer is any grown man who sees him coming. Usually all you have to do to shut Norman Bates down is be just an adult man and fucking hit him with a hard right across the face. He goes down every time. He takes a hit like a fucking broomstick. But I digress. The remake of Wreck is beat for beat, which means they kind of hit all the same points. There's a few shots that are repeated. There are certain parts that are repeated, which I remember that. I remember that distinctly, but the feel of it is completely fucking wrong. And that's really where Wreck shines, is the feel is good. It really capitalized on the shaky cam, first person view aesthetic, where you feel trapped in it. You know what I mean? The remake, the Quarantine, it's called Quarantine. The main characters, whoever the fuck that lady is that plays Deborah Morgan on Dexter, she is the same as the main character. They do a lot of the same stuff, but she overreacts a little bit too much, and the lighting is too good. When you're in Wreck, you know, even when they're putting up the quarantine around the building and stuff, and all the plastic is going up, and the lights aren't very good, and there's basically the monsters or zombies of the other tenants in the building. There's a lot of stuff that's held in shadow or hidden from view, not just as a directorial choice, which it might be, but as an incident of the lighting and of the situation. You know what I mean? With Quarantine, they tried to be... They didn't even really try to be. They just acted too conveniently. When they needed something seen, they lit it. When they needed something understood, they shot it. As opposed to with wreck, which, you know, there's a scene where a guy has a gun and he pulls the gun out, and it's kind of like you can't really see it, but you can. You know what I mean? He's a shadow. He's in a dark room. The only way you can see him is because he's in silhouette against a window behind him, and he's barely visible. And, you know, that's kind of like the first escalation, or one of the first major escalations of violence in the movie. I might be a little bit out of turn, but, you know, that's when things are really starting to go off the rail. In the Quarantine remake, it's just like there. He's just there with his gun out. I'm like, eh. And, you know, that was pointed out to me when I resaw the movies again later. So that's not my immediate and direct observation, but like, it's a really good way that I've seen somebody else describe how that goes out, that it goes. And that's Adam from YMS, yourmoviesucks.com on YouTube, which is a take it or leave it movie review channel. But his review of Quarantine is way better than anything I can do. You should check it out. And but yeah, that kind of continues throughout the entire thing. But more to speak about Wreck's qualities is that it is dark, and it is dingy, and it is increasingly gross as you get into it. And it really does give you the feeling that not only are people being infected, but the building itself is being infected, and that the building is potentially contagious on its own. You know what I mean? Like, they start on the bottom floor. And basically, the entire plot is them getting to the penthouse suite on the very top. So maybe not necessarily a suite, but it is the topmost floor of the building. Very old school premise. Get to the top of the tower. It's a multi-story apartment building. And, you know, on the bottom, when they first get in there, it is just an apartment building. It's empty. It's clean enough. You know, it's not like an extremely upscale part of town or anything, but it's also not, you know, an absolute tenement. There's all the things that you would expect to see in an apartment building with, you know, more than like 20 tenants or something. It's got big thing of letters on the wall, but there's also parts of the building they can't get into. Like, it would actually make a really good video game. It's got a real Resident Evil vibe to it, and I mean that in the very strictest sense of like exploring the mansion and the Arclay, I think it's the Arclay mansion, in Resident Evil 1, where, you know, like when it starts, it is just a place that you're in, and it's got all of the normal traipsings of a place that you would expect in that sort of situation. But as they get in, as people start dying, as they start running into people that have been infected for longer, people that are actually tripping out all the way over past the line where they become violent, you know, zombies and stuff. The higher they get in the building, then you start seeing like more destruction. Doors are damaged. There's bodily fluids or fluids in general on places. There's, you know, shredded this, ripped that. People are getting more and more injured, and it's just got that good building feel. They even go back downstairs a few times and stuff. But that's kind of inconsequential to the point I'm trying to make, so fuck it. But ultimately, yeah, they finally get to the top floor, and when they finally get to the top floor, it's like you are never under the impression that this was not a bad idea to come into this room, because it is established from very early on in the story that the patient zero is probably the woman that lives at the very, very, very top of the apartment building. And, you know, you get it in hints and bits, like, oh, that's where the weird woman lives. I've heard sounds. She hasn't come out of that apartment in months. I thought she moved away. Those kind of things. And you see those for other rooms too, but yeah, it's really good in that respect, and I think everybody should check it out. I would say it's a fairly like a must watch, especially if you've ever dabbled in the found footage, first person's perspective genre. I'd say this is the best movie I've ever seen that's first person like that. I really can't think of another one that's better offhand. There might be one, even though I would agree to that. I can't really think of it right now. But you should absolutely check it out. It's usually streaming somewhere. It might be on Shudder right now. It might not. I think when I watched it with my fiance about 7 or 8 months back, we watched it on Vudu. So, hey, get out there, find it. And, of course, once you've watched it, come and hang out with us. Facebook.com/Westside Fairytales Horror and Lit Club. Man, everyone's in there. We're always talking. If you like talking about the show and you made it 60 minutes into this, you can come talk about the show there. You can talk about episodes. You can chat with people. And honestly, if you want to talk about stuff that you're reading or watching that interests you, you can talk about anything horror or lit. So any book under the sun, I don't care. If it's a book, talk about it. If it's horror, talk about it. You can talk about video games like Dead Space and Resident Evil. You can talk about movies. You can talk about other podcasts you want, so long as they are horror. So pop on in. Again, that's Facebook.com/Westside Fairytales. On that note, if you want to send me a direct message because you fucking hate what I had to say, you don't like any of my opinions, or you agree, or you just want to clarify something, or you have a point to make, please reach out to me at westsidefairytales@gmail.com. That's westsidefairytales@gmail.com. I respond to everybody that writes me. I love it when people write me. Don't think you're going to be weird or bother me. I like talking to people. That's what I do. If you want to talk in a more open way, or you just want to pop by and say hi, or if you just want to spy on me, I have Instagram accounts. I have Twitter accounts. Westside Fairytales. Just search it. You'll be able to get there. Twitter @WS Fairytales. We're also on YouTube. We're going to be trying to make some videos there soon, but maybe we'll get there. Maybe we won't. It's not a high priority compared to the rest of the podcast, but we have YouTube too. But most importantly, we do need your support because this is an independent podcast. If you made it this far into the podcast, please, 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 please consider giving me just $1 on Patreon. For just $1, you can get early access to episodes like this and more. Yeah, for $5, which is what we really consider the basic donation, we are going to send you monthly or PDFs of the monthly stories. You're going to get access to behind the story information, or behind the story episodes where I give you information on how I kind of came to make up the monthly story. And then for $10, $20, $50, we got all kinds of stuff. We're going to send you merch, stickers, bookmarks, even posters, and signed copies of the stories, depending on what you pledge. So that's patreon.com/Westside Fairytales. Also, if you want to support the show with just a one-time donation, consider just going to our merch store and just buying some merch, man. If you want to buy a t-shirt, we've got great logo t-shirts. We got a logo splash t-shirt. It says Westside Fairytales over it with the big skull in the middle. Got hoodies. You can buy the stickers and the bookmarks there. You can buy the poster there. I will write whatever you want on it and send it to you. Just hop on over there. That's just westsidefairytales.com/merch. If you get a second, get on iTunes, hop on Castbox, pop on over to Spotify, hippity hip hip hop, and you don't stop until you get to Pandora or whatever, and send us and just lay out a nice review for us. Tell other people, hey, I like that, because it'll help us rise in the search rankings and make it more easy to find the show. Tell your friends to subscribe, and I think we're going to end it there. So until next time, as always, stay safe out there.